Well, for the last 10, 12 years, I've spent the majority of my working life out of South Africa. So it's been in Nigeria, in Dubai, in India, Pakistan, and so on. And I've had quite a lot of exposure in emerging markets. So I haven't been, to the UK for 14 years. I haven't, it's all been emerging markets, and it's been fascinating being able to see what you can do with a screwdriver, a piece of sticky tape, and some gum in these markets. So I mean, I was in Nigeria before there were cell phones. You didn't know if you're going to be kidnapped at the airport or not. But I started out life in a below-the-line agency, moved into research, then opened a research company in Nigeria, joined Nando's as international brand manager, and that's where I really cut my teeth on a whole range of emerging markets, and it really was a defining role for me. Then moved to Cape Town to work with a trend forecasting company, was there for a year, wanted a bit more excitement in terms of work, so moved back to Joburg and joined TBWA as, well, I was headhunted by TBWA to move up to Nigeria to run one of their large new account, Globacom, across West Africa. So that helped me understand the mobile environment in West Africa quite nicely. I then came back and joined a company called MTV, where I was head of marketing, and launched Comedy Central into South Africa. And then moved to a large international brand agency where I was MD for West Africa. Decided I'd rather not just be somebody who parachutes into a country and tells people how to suck eggs, but rather try and build up capacity in the countries that we're dealing with. So Wunderbrand was born, and we work in Nigeria, Ghana, South Africa, Botswana, Lesotho, Swaziland, Namibia, even Algeria, where we've done some naming. So we really are quite a Pan-African agency in terms of our stretch and our exposure. And one of the things that I've picked up in my time is the way that people look at South Africans. I deal with a couple of CEOs in Nigeria who have studied at Stanford, Harvard, live half the year in the States or in the UK. And as a South African, and as a couple of my peers who don't travel as much, perhaps not to the States, not to the UK, go and tell them about this is how a bank should be run, this is how communication should be run, this is the best luxury brand, and so on. We honestly don't know as much as we do. We must remember, we're on the arse end of the continent, right at the bottom, whereas these Nigerians and Ghanaians and Kenyans are traveling much more extensively than us. So it puts us in a position where we think we are the America of Africa, where in fact we are actually the Canada almost. So we're sort of not as cool anymore. And it causes a problem when you are dealing with people who have got way more exposure and you're trying to tell them how to run their business. You don't come across as credible. And that's why lots of South African businesses are struggling in the likes of Nigeria in particular, because we are sending up people who've been educated, say at UCT, great university and so on, but it's not Stanford, it's not Harvard, it's not Oxford, and you're dealing with those people who've got exposure to people from all walks of life in these countries. So we as an agency really, we try and use international best practice. We're not trying to be the best in Africa, we're trying to be the best in the world. Our competitors, for example, I keep knocking heads against Landor, for example, and it irritates me because they're so much more expensive and they are so much better known. But those are the people that we are competing with in Africa. So I'm not competing against the local agencies. They're not even on our radar. So very exciting times for us, and we do have a big challenge ahead of us just to stay ahead of the pack. We also have some issues in the rest of Africa, where South Africa, yes, we have our Silicon Valley in Cape Town and so on, with a couple of hippies with an apple and so on. But there are governments across Africa, say in Rwanda, Kenya, and in Nigeria and Ghana, where being digital hotspots or digital centers of excellence are part of the government agenda. South Africa, it's not part of the government agenda. We haven't even, transferred our television into digital. We are supposed to be the America of Africa, and we are being leapfrogged by our counterparts that we look down on typically. And what this does in these countries, because there is a focus from government and from the private sector in terms of building up the digital capability, because that's where jobs are going to come from, that's where new revenue is going to come from, and where they can have a differentiator. You are seeing small little companies mushroom up in these countries because there's finance available for them, because there's a focus on building these organizations. There are young kids who are learning tech from a young age. People from the diaspora are coming back. So the majority of the top Kenyan execs have been studying in the UK and the US. Isis Nyong'o, for example, who's the MD of InMobi, you know, trained in trade in the States, worked for Google, worked for MTV, and is, you know, now back in her, in her native Kenya. Those are the kind of people that we're competing against. So South Africa needs to really move its backside in terms of really focusing on communications and getting, you know, cheap access, or just access, not even cheap access to better broadband and data, so that people can actually start progressing and our youth can start understanding how the internet works, start coding, because it's not expensive to code. You can use a computer from the 1990s, to be honest, to code. It's about what you do with it.